The sun in Glacivia was a pale, distant orb, shrouded by layers of ash-grey clouds that cast a constant twilight over the land. It had been this way for months, ever since the Ice Dragon Varnoth awakened from its centuries-long slumber. Its breath, colder than death itself, swept through the kingdom, transforming verdant forests into crystalline wastelands and rivers into jagged shards of ice. The people whispered of famine and despair, and even the royal palace, once warm with golden fires, was now a hollow shell of flickering embers. Princess Lyra sat in the great hall, her breath forming misty tendrils in the frigid air. The stained glass windows, depicting Glacivia's past triumphs, were now frosted over, their vibrant colours muted. Lyra's fingers, wrapped tightly around the silver hilt of her ceremonial dagger, trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of decisions yet to be made. Her father, the once mighty King Aldred, lay ill in his chambers, his strength sapped by the icy winds that seeped through the palace walls. "The dragon grows bolder," General Theron said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He stood before the princess, his broad frame casting long shadows in the dim torchlight. "The villages at the northern border are abandoned. Refugees flock here daily, begging for warmth, for food. We cannot sustain them." Lyra rose from her seat, her fur-lined cloak sweeping behind her. "I will not let Glacivia fall," she said, her voice steady despite the tempest of doubt churning within her. "What news of the warriors sent to the Everfrost Mountains?" Theron hesitated, his jaw tightening. "None have returned, Your Highness." The silence that followed was heavier than the icy air. Lyra clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms. She had hoped, prayed, that at least one of the kingdom's bravest might succeed where others had failed. The legends of Varnoth were ancient, told in hushed tones by hearthsides for generations. But now, the stories had taken form, the dragon's icy wrath a reality that no sword or spear could quell. "Perhaps the Oracle of Snow might," Theron began, but Lyra raised a hand to silence him. "The Oracle deals in riddles and omens," she said, though her words lacked conviction, "and Glacivia needs action, not cryptic prophecies." "And yet," a soft voice interjected, "the Oracle may be your only hope." Lyra turned to see her mother, Queen Selene, entering the hall. Though age had touched her features, Selene carried herself with the grace of someone who had seen the rise and fall of empires. Her gown, embroidered with silver threads, shimmered faintly in the dim light, as if defying the gloom that surrounded them. "The oracle is ancient," Selene continued, her voice calm but firm. "Her wisdom is older than this kingdom. If there is a way to end Varnoth's curse, she will know it." Lyra's gaze shifted to the frost-rimed windows. The oracle's temple lay at the edge of the kingdom, perched atop cliffs that overlooked the sea of shards. To journey there would mean days of travel through treacherous terrain. Yet what other choice did she have? Every passing moment brought Glacivia closer to ruin. "I will go," Lyra said at last, her tone resolute. "I will seek the oracle and demand answers." Theron's brow furrowed. "It is too dangerous, Your Highness. If something were to happen to you, if I do nothing, Glacivia will perish," Lyra cut in. "Our people look to their leaders for hope, not excuses. If my father cannot stand, then I must." Celine placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You have your father's courage," she said softly. "But you will need more than bravery to face what lies ahead." Lyra nodded, though her heart ached with the enormity of her task. She turned to Theron. "Prepare my horse and provisions. I leave at dawn." As the hall emptied, Lyra remained, staring into the dim embers of the central hearth. The flickering flames seemed to mock her, their warmth a fleeting memory of a time when Glacivia flourished. The dragon's shadow loomed over everything, and yet she felt a faint spark within her, a determination that refused to be extinguished. The kingdom might be frozen, but her resolve burned bright. The journey to the Oracle of Snow was a battle against both the elements and Lyra's own resolve. The world beyond the palace gates was a stark, white void, where the horizon blurred into the sky, and the howling wind whispered ancient secrets no one could decipher. Ice encrusted her horse's mane and the edges of her fur-lined cloak, but Lyra pressed on, her determination a fragile flame in the encroaching cold. It was 3 days before she reached the cliffs where the oracle's temple stood, rising from the ice like the jagged spires of a forgotten cathedral. The temple was a testament to a time before men ruled these lands. The sea of shards churned below, its icy waves crashing against the cliffs, sending up plumes of frost. The sound was a low, mournful moan, as if the ocean itself lamented the world's endless winter. Lyra dismounted and made her way up the narrow stone steps carved into the cliffside. The wind howled around her, and each step felt heavier than the last, as if unseen forces sought to turn her back. At the top, the entrance to the temple loomed before her, a massive archway of frost-covered stone, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. She hesitated for a moment, her breath misting in the icy air, before stepping inside. The interior of the temple was eerily silent, the air thick with a stillness that seemed to press against her chest. The walls shimmered as though made of glass, reflecting faint ghostly images of Lyra's own face as she moved deeper into the cavernous space. At its center stood the oracle, a figure draped in a robe of shimmering white, her face obscured by a veil that seemed to be woven from moonlight. "Princess Lyra of Glacivia," the oracle said, her voice a whisper that echoed through the temple. "You come seeking answers." Lyra bowed, her knees brushing the frost-covered floor. "Great oracle, my kingdom is dying. The Ice Dragon Varnoth, has cursed the land with its frozen breath. I seek a way to stop it and save my people." The oracle was silent for a long moment, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. "The dragon's curse is not one of malice," she said finally. "It is a cry of pain, born from a heart that once burned bright with life, but was turned to ice by betrayal." Lyra frowned. "Betrayal? By whom?" The oracle raised a hand, her fingers delicate and pale as snow. "Long ago, Varnoth was a guardian of warmth, a protector of balance. But men grew greedy, seeking to control its fire for their own gain. They betrayed the dragon, chaining its heart in frost. Now it knows only bitterness and vengeance." "Then how can I end this curse?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the chill that ran through her. "How can I make Varnoth see reason?" The oracle extended her other hand, and from her palm rose a shard of glowing crystal. It pulsed faintly with a warm light, its edges glinting like frozen fire. "This is a fragment of the Heartfire, the flame that once burned within Varnoth. You must carry it to the dragon's lair in the Everfrost Mountains. Only there can the Heartfire be reignited." Lyra took the shard, its warmth startling against her cold fingers. "And what will happen when I reach the lair?" The oracle's veil seemed to shift, though her face remained hidden. "The journey will test your courage, your resolve, and your compassion. The dragon will not easily relinquish its pain. You must face not only Varnoth, but the truth of your own heart. Only then can the frozen fire be restored." Lyra clenched the shard tightly, its glow reflected in her eyes. "I will do whatever it takes." The oracle's voice softened. "Beware, princess. The path to the Everfrost Mountains is fraught with trials, and not all who walk it return. Trust in your light and remember, even the coldest heart can be warmed." As Lyra turned to leave, the oracle's final words echoed through the temple like a faint melody. "The flame you seek to restore burns not only for the dragon, but for all who have lost their way." With the shard in hand and her purpose renewed, Lyra stepped out into the freezing winds once more. The journey ahead was perilous, but the spark of hope now flickered brighter within her. The dragon's pain, once an abstract legend, had become something tangible and something she could heal. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that Glacivia's frost might someday thaw. The Everfrost Mountains loomed on the horizon, their jagged peaks piercing the heavy grey sky like ancient sentinels. As Lyra, Kael, and the enigmatic ranger, Era, trudged through snow that reached their knees, the wind screamed around them, carrying shards of ice that bit into their skin like needles. The shard of Heartfire in Lyra's pocket pulsed faintly, a fragile warmth that seemed to push back against the encroaching cold. It was their only guide in this desolate expanse, its light flickering faintly like a distant star in a storm. Lyra moved ahead with the confidence of someone who knew the mountains well, her leather armor lined with thick fur, and her hood pulled low to shield her face from the wind. She spoke little, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for dangers that Lyra and Cale could not see. Cale, ever loyal, stayed close to Lyra, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, ready to defend her against whatever lay ahead. The first trial came unexpectedly. As they crossed a frozen lake, its surface shimmering like glass beneath a thin layer of snow, the ice groaned ominously. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. "The lake," she whispered. "It's unstable." Lyra turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Move slowly. Don't stop and don't run." But before they could take another step, the ice cracked with a deafening snap. A gaping fissure opened beneath their feet, and Lyra felt the ground give way. Cale lunged, grabbing her arm and pulling her back just as a section of the lake collapsed into icy water. From the dark depths, something stirred, a shape moving beneath the surface, swift and sinuous. "What was that?" Lyra gasped, clutching Cale's arm. Lyra's voice was grim. "Frost serpents! They sense the heat of the living." As if summoned by her words, the surface of the lake shattered, and a serpentine creature of ice and shadow emerged. Its eyes glowed with a pale blue light, and its jagged fangs dripped with frozen mist. Lyra's heart raced as the serpent lunged toward them, its maw opening wide. "Run!" Lyra shouted, drawing her bow and firing an arrow tipped with silver. The shot struck true, embedding itself in the serpent's neck, but the creature barely flinched. The group sprinted across the lake, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as the ice cracked and splintered beneath them. Cale turned mid-run, drawing his sword and slashing at the serpent as it pursued them. The blade struck its icy scales, sending shards flying, but the creature pressed on, undeterred. Lyra, clutching the shard of Heartfire, felt its warmth grow stronger. An idea struck her, a reckless, desperate idea. She stopped abruptly, turning to face the serpent. "Lyra, no!" Cale shouted. But she ignored him. Holding the shard aloft, she focused all her will on its faint glow. The warmth grew, spreading through her fingers and into her chest. The serpent hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing as the light intensified. With a cry, Lyra thrust the shard toward it, and a burst of golden fire erupted from her hand. The serpent recoiled, its icy form melting as the light consumed it. Within moments it was gone, leaving only a pool of steaming water. Lyra collapsed to her knees, the shard dimming once more. Cale was at her side in an instant, his face pale. "Are you mad? That thing could have killed you." "I had to try," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "The shard. It responds to the dragon's power. Maybe it can protect us." Lyra approached, her expression unreadable. "You were reckless," she said bluntly, though there was a note of grudging respect in her voice. but effective. Let's hope you can summon that strength again, because this was only the beginning. The second trial came as they entered a narrow pass between towering cliffs. The wind here was eerily still, the silence oppressive. Shadows moved along the cliff walls, and Lyra felt a creeping unease. As they advanced, figures emerged from the snow, tall, gaunt shapes with hollow eyes and tattered cloaks of frost. "The icebound," Lyra murmured. "Souls lost to the dragon's curse. They will not let us pass easily." The icebound moved toward them, their motion slow but deliberate. Kale drew his sword, and Ira knocked an arrow, but Lyra raised a hand. "Wait," she said. "They're cursed, not evil." Approaching cautiously, she held out the shard of Heartfire. Its light seemed to soothe the figures, their hollow eyes softening. One of them, a woman whose frozen face still bore traces of beauty, reached out a skeletal hand. As Lyra placed the shard in her palm, the woman's form dissolved into a cascade of snowflakes, and the others followed. The pass cleared, leaving only silence behind. Lyra exhaled, lowering her bow. "You're full of surprises, Princess." Lyra looked at the shard, its glow faint but steady. "We're running out of time, let's keep moving." The Everfrost Mountains awaited, their secrets buried in the ice. Each step brought them closer to Varnoth, and to the truth Lyra was not yet ready to face. The Everfrost Mountains rose around them like an unyielding fortress, their icy cliffs and jagged peaks bathed in an eerie blue light that seemed to emanate from within the ice itself. As Lyra, Kale, and Lyra neared the entrance to Varnoth's lair, the shard of Heartfire pulsed with a steady warmth, as if drawing them forward. Yet with each step, Lyra felt a growing weight in her chest, a strange mixture of fear and resolve. The entrance to the dragon's lair was a vast archway of ice, carved with ancient runes that shimmered faintly. Beyond it lay darkness, interrupted only by the occasional flicker of blue flames that danced along the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of frost and something older, something alive. Lyra gripped the shard tightly as they crossed the threshold. Inside, the cavern was immense, its ceiling lost in shadow. Stalactites of ice hung like swords, and the floor was slick with frozen mist. At the center of the cavern, a massive pool of water lay encased in a thin layer of ice. Above it, the Heartfire shard's warmth flared, its light reflecting off the crystalline surfaces in a dazzling display. And then, from the depths of the cavern, came the sound of scales scraping against ice. Varnoth emerged slowly, its enormous body a fusion of shimmering frost and jagged shadows. Its wings, translucent and edged with frost, spread wide, and its glowing blue eyes locked onto the intruders. The dragon's breath escaped in a cloud of icy mist that froze the air before it. It moved with a terrifying grace, its claws clicking against the ice as it circled the group. "So," Varnoth rumbled, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the cavern. Another would-be hero comes to steal my fire. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding but her grip on the shard unwavering. I did not come to steal, she said, her voice steady. I came to restore. Varnoth's eyes narrowed. Restore? You speak as though you understand what has been lost. It lowered its massive head, bringing its gaze level with hers. You are but another fool seeking to extinguish my pain with empty words. I know of your betrayal, Lyra said, her breath visible in the freezing air. I know how men once chained your heart in frost, but I also know that vengeance will not heal you. It will only consume you. The dragon's growl reverberated through the cavern, shaking the ice beneath their feet. You presume to lecture me on pain, little one. Do you know what it is to have your purpose torn from you? To be left with nothing but bitterness and cold? Lyra hesitated, her thoughts racing. The dragon's rage was palpable, but beneath it, she sensed something deeper. Grief, loneliness, and a yearning for the warmth it had lost. No, she admitted softly. I cannot claim to understand your pain, but I do understand loss. My people suffer under this endless winter. My father lies dying. I fight not just for them, but for you. For the part of you that still remembers what it means to protect, not destroy. Varnoth reared back, its icy scales glinting in the shard's light. Empty words, it hissed, its breath freezing the air around them. You cannot bring back what was stolen. The dragon lunged, its claws slashing toward Lyra. Chaol leapt forward, his sword clashing against the dragon's talon. But the force of the blow sent him sprawling across the ice. Era fired arrow after arrow, each one striking true but shattering harmlessly against Varnoth's scales. Lyra held her ground, clutching the shard. Its warmth grew stronger, spreading through her chest like a flame. She closed her eyes, focusing on the fragment of the Heartfire, willing it to connect with the dragon's frozen soul. Varnoth, she called out, her voice clear and unwavering. You are more than your pain. Let me help you remember. The shard flared with golden light, illuminating the cavern in a blinding flash. Varnoth recoiled, a roar of anguish shaking the walls. For a moment, the dragon's icy form seemed to crack, revealing glimpses of something molten and alive beneath the frost. The blue flames along the walls flickered, their colour shifting to a vibrant gold. Chaol and Era looked on in stunned silence as Lyra stepped closer to the dragon, her hand outstretched. You are a guardian of warmth and life, she said. That part of you is not gone. It's only buried. The dragon stilled, its massive body trembling. Its glowing eyes softened, the rage within them dimming. The shard, Varnoth whispered, its voice no longer a growl but a low, mournful rumble. It carries the fire I lost. Lyra nodded, tears freezing on her cheeks. Let it guide you back, She placed the shard against the dragon's chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the frost encasing Varnoth began to crack and fall away. The blue flames roared to life, their golden light filling the cavern. The ice melted, revealing a pool of glowing water beneath. Varnoth's body transformed, its icy scales replaced by a radiant, shimmering form that pulsed with warmth. The dragon lowered its head, its eyes meeting Lyra's. "You have reignited the fire," it said, its voice filled with wonder. "You have reminded me of what I once was." Lyra stepped back, her legs trembling. "Then end this winter, Varnoth. Let Glacivia thrive again." With a mighty roar, the dragon spread its wings, and the cavern filled with a radiant warmth that seemed to seep into the very earth. Lyra's heart swelled with hope as she realized the curse was finally lifting. But the journey was not yet over. The Heartfire still burned, and its light held secrets yet to be revealed. The light from the Heartfire spread through the cavern like a tide of warmth, banishing the lingering frost from every surface. Varnoth stood at the heart of the chamber, its form transformed. A magnificent being of radiant light and molten scales, with wings that shimmered like the first rays of dawn. The frost and shadows that had once clung to it like a second skin were gone, revealing a creature not of destruction, but of life and balance. Lyra stood before the dragon, her breath catching as the shard of Heartfire in her hand dissolved into a burst of golden sparks, merging with the flames now pulsing within Varnoth's chest. The cavern trembled as the warmth of the Heartfire seeped into the walls, melting centuries-old ice and revealing veins of crystal that glowed softly with an inner light. "Princess Lyra," Varnoth said, its voice now a resonant harmony that echoed with both power and grace. "You have done what no other could. You have restored the fire that once gave me purpose." Lyra stepped forward, her boots splashing into the newly thawed pool of water at the dragon's feet. "And the winter?" she asked, her voice steady despite the awe she felt. "Will it end?" Varnoth lowered its massive head until its eyes, now glowing with warmth, met hers. "The frost that grips your kingdom was not born of my will, but of my pain. With my fire restored, so too shall the balance return." The dragon rose to its full height, spreading its wings wide. A deep, resonant roar filled the cavern, carrying with it a pulse of heat that rippled outward. Lyra felt it pass through her, a wave of warmth that carried not just heat, but hope. She could almost see it spreading beyond the cavern, melting the ice that had choked the land, awakening the slumbering earth and bringing life back to Glacivia. Kale and Ira approached cautiously, their expressions a mixture of relief and wonder. Kale, his sword sheathed once more, placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved the kingdom." Era, though more reserved, inclined her head toward Lyra. "It seems you've proven me wrong, Princess. You didn't just face the dragon, you redeemed it." Lyra turned to Varnoth, her gaze steady. "The winter may end, but the scars it left will remain. My people will rebuild, but they will remember the suffering they endured. Will you help us, Varnoth? Will you guard the balance, as you once did?" The dragon regarded her for a moment, its glowing eyes filled with something like sorrow. "The wounds of the past are not so easily healed," it said. "But you have reminded me of my purpose. I will remain in these mountains, not as a harbinger of frost, but as a guardian of the fire that sustains all life." Lyra nodded, feeling a weight lift from her heart. "Thank you." The group began their descent from the Everfrost Mountains, the warmth of the Heartfire lingering in the air. As they passed through the valleys and forests, they saw the transformation taking place. Rivers once locked in ice flowed freely again, their waters shimmering in the sunlight. Trees, their branches heavy with frost, now bore the first signs of budding leaves. Villages that had been silent under the weight of snow buzzed with activity as people emerged from their homes, their faces filled with wonder and hope. When they reached the gates of the capital, the crowd that had gathered erupted into cheers at the sight of their princess. Lyra dismounted, her legs weak with exhaustion, but her spirit unyielding, and embraced her mother, Queen Selene, who stood waiting with tears streaming down her face. "Your father," the queen began, her voice trembling. "He grows stronger. The warmth has returned." Lyra smiled, though her own tears blurred her vision. "It is not my doing alone," she said. "Varnoth has been restored, and the balance has been reclaimed." In the days that followed, Glacivia began to heal. The fields thawed, the rivers swelled, and life returned to the land. Lyra's name was spoken with reverence, but she remained humble, knowing the victory belonged not to her alone, but to the courage of her companions and the redemption of a soul once lost to frost and grief. As for Varnoth, the dragon was true to its word. Though it remained in the mountains, its presence was felt throughout the land in the warmth of the sun, the gentle rains, and the vitality of the earth. The people came to see it not as a monster, but as a protector, a reminder of the delicate balance that sustains all life. And in the heart of the Everfrost Mountains, where the flames of the Heartfire burned eternal, Lyra found peace. She had faced the dragon not with a sword, but with compassion and courage, and in doing so, had saved not just her kingdom, but the spirit of a being that had once been its guardian. In the years to come, Glacivia flourished, and the story of the princess and the ice dragon became legend told by firesides on winter nights, a tale of warmth, redemption, and the enduring power of hope.